Hi, I'm Jill Vitale. I'm with the Eden Alternative, and thank you to everyone who is joining us for this very special live stream today. We are going to be talking about how do we connect during COVID? How do we rethink and reprogram leisure and senior living? And this very special live stream is being presented by the Eden Alternative in partnership with Walk With Me, which is the Canadian culture change movement, spearheaded by Schlegel, the University of Waterloo Research Institute for Aging, and CapitalCare, are very, very good friends in Canada. So my guests here today are Sherry Schaefer, who is the co-chair of Walk With Me at CapitalCare, Dr. Al Power, who is, many of you know, he is the Schlegel Chair in Aging and Dementia Innovation with the Research Institute for Aging. And he is a geriatrician, an author, musician, many things. We're thrilled to have you with us today, Dr. Al, and Heather Rozak, who is a recreation therapist at CapitalCare. So thank you all for being here with us today. Thank you to everyone who is joining us live for the show. I encourage you to use the comment box to put in questions, comments. We will have time for questions throughout this live stream. So I am going to now turn it over to Sherry to get things started.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to be part of this. We are very pleased. I'm co-host for the Walk With Me conference with Miss Hillary Dunn out of Schlegel and Research and Aging. And we are very happy that we are to announce to you all that we are going to continue with our Walk With Me conference, but we have moved it to 2022. We just think that that will give everyone a little bit extra time to get settled and past the COVID pandemic, that we can be back together again. So we're really excited about that. It's going to be in Calgary, Alberta, set with a beautiful background of the mountains, the Canadian Rockies. Great conference, May 26th to 27th. We hope you'll join us. And in the meantime, we are really pleased that today is the start of our webinar series. It's a 3-part series that will happen starting today, and then 2 more sessions in the new year. And those webinars will help us continue with our education and learning as we wait for the great in-person conference of Walk With Me 2022. So from here, I'm going to turn it over to today's session and over to Dr. Al Power.
Thank you very much, Sherry. Appreciate it. And thanks, everybody, for joining us today. We are, as you know, still in the COVID pandemic. I think a lot of us hoped that things would be easing up by now, but instead, we're seeing a lot of increases around the globe. So I think it was wise to hold off on Walk With Me. I don't think that the flu season is going to bring us a lot of relief at this point, and we need to continue to buckle down. But as we start to settle into thinking about COVID as maybe a new era of potential pandemics, as opposed to a one-off, because there have been others that have been not so severe, but this has been happening with our increasing globalization, climate change, et cetera. I think our question on many people's minds is, we are so concerned now about spreading infection. We're so concerned about all the things that have happened to us in the last 8 months. Why a culture change conference? Is culture change passé? Or is it somehow working against our ability to keep people healthy and safe in an era of pandemics? And so I'd just like to spend a few minutes talking about what I've learned in talking to people, visiting people, hearing about the stories of people during the pandemic, and hearing about some of the research that I think reinforces my idea that this is actually an ideal time to be thinking about the culture change movement, and that in fact, many of the things that have been taught in the culture change movement over the last 20 years are very good infection control. So the message of my little talk here is that culture change and medical care or infection control or good nursing care are not mutually exclusive. They actually, one can support the other. And it's just a push to move a little farther into some of the areas that maybe we've been talking about, but that people haven't been able to accomplish yet. So a couple of stories. As As Jill mentioned, I do work part-time in Canada with Schlegel Villages and the RIA. And in one conversation with some of the neighborhood coordinators in Schlegel Villages, I heard that many people living with dementia actually were seen to be a lot calmer and more content after the pandemic took hold than they had been in the months leading up to the pandemic. And that seemed unusual because of all the stress we've been under. And certainly that hasn't been universally the case, but there were some areas where this was seen. And so we decided to look at that in detail and say, what are some of the factors you think that have led to this? And they came up with several things. One of them was that because of the need to decrease the spread of infection, they were cohorting their team members to one neighborhood. They weren't rotating team members to different neighborhoods to take care of different people. They were cohorting them with certain residents, and they were cohorting them with each other on that neighborhood. And that led to a lot of positives, getting to know people better, even getting to know people beyond their ability to use words to express their needs or their choices. It helped them to get to know their coworkers better. And it caused a familiarity that got beyond wearing masks or got beyond some of the protection that was going on, and maybe even to some extent created a second level of family. Obviously not your own family, but when you're being kept from seeing your own family, when you have familiar faces, people you know and trust, that actually is a bit of a balm for you that helps hold over through the toughest times. Another thing that was happening was because they didn't have group meals, they were being much more flexible with people's schedules, wake up times, times for personal care, and also activities because the large group activities were gone. So a lot more of individualization, a lot more of following people's internal rhythms, which we know is something we've been teaching to help improve the well-being of people living with dementia. And while it's not helpful to have family members not coming in, there was a lot less commotion, and there was a lot less of the casual passing through the neighborhoods by people who maybe didn't have a specific purpose there, but may have appeared as strangers or intruders to people who lived there who didn't recognize them. There was no more parking people in front of television sets or putting people in places where they were sitting in groups but without really being attended to, or in large group activities that didn't really meet the needs and abilities of everybody who was brought into the activity. So with this individualization, with these important relationships that came, we were seeing an improvement in the way people were responding, and actually people were happier and calmer. We've been teaching these principles of dementia care for some time. And so once again, this really puts that to the front burner. Another research study I'd like to mention is that with the Greenhouse Project in the United States, which is a small house project, which has over 300 homes now across the United States. And they've been doing a study with the University of North Carolina and Dr. Cheryl Zimmerman. And they've been looking at the greenhouse and another small house model. A few of the cottages at Otterbein have joined the cohort too. And they've been looking at these 300 or so homes through the COVID era and trying to decide what their experience has been with infection compared to the larger population of long-term care homes in the United States. This is a monthly data collection that's ongoing, but as of September, the homes that were in this project, the Greenhouse Project, these small households, actually had only 1/5 of the infection rate of the national long-term care average, and their death rate was only 4%, 1/25 as high as it has been in long-term care at large. And once again, I've spent some time speaking with the director, Susan Ryan, and talking about this. And I think there are many factors, physical, operational, and interpersonal factors. The interpersonal factor is, once again, and operational, the fact that they are consistently staffed for the most part. And people are staying with the same residents. There's not a lot of rotation. There are an agency coming into most of these homes. And there's a lot of longevity among the staff members because it's such a well thought of model by the workers, such an empowered model. And so these relationships and this deep knowing are really, really deep. Also, there are some structural factors. There are private rooms for everyone with an ensuite shower. So there's no doubles. And a study that we've done up at the RIA has shown that these old style multi-bedded rooms are one of the largest risk factors for COVID death, at least in the cohort we studied up in Ontario. So we know the private rooms are better. We've been talking about this for years. We know that ensuite showers are better. We know that direct access to the outdoors is better. The greenhouse also has an open floor plan, so people can be socially distanced, physically distanced, that is, but socially engaged during meals, during activities, because we have the kitchen, the living room, the dining room, all within eye view and earshot, and people can still attend gatherings or meals without being right on top of each other or within that 6-foot margin. There are some other issues too, but basically this shows that some of the things we're talking about, smaller households, 10 to 12 in each greenhouse household, having the access to the outdoors, having the relationships are extremely important. So what culture change does is it provides us a better environment for dealing with pandemics. Relationships are infection control. Consistent staffing is infection control. Deep knowing and structural change are infection control. The other thing that culture change does for us, and this is because I think we are going to be dealing with pandemics on and off for some time. This is not just a one-off, as I said, and that is that culture change also gives us a pathway to negotiate risk. Because what we've decided and what we've learned from this pandemic is initially we went on lockdown and it seemed like the right thing to do. And that seemed to protect people from infection, but we saw that actually lockdown had side effects, the effects of isolation, the effects of keeping people in the room, the effects of drugging people who were upset because they didn't want to stay in their room. So there is no risk-free solution. And what we need to do is we need to negotiate risk. We need to pull back a bit. We need to say, how can we enable safer movement during a pandemic? How can we enable safer visitation of family members who are also essential relationships in the person's life? How can we begin to find the nuances in these very rigid policies and procedures to come up with the best overall successful answer for each individual and their needs? And so this is something else that culture change teaches, is how to balance quality of life, quality of care, people's individual preferences, their individual risk tolerance, to find a way forward that best meets the needs in the safest possible way for every individual who's living in long-term care. So I hope that you will continue to engage with culture change. I hope you'll put Walk With Me on your calendar and stay tuned because there's lots more coming up. And now I'm going to turn this over to Heather Rozak again from CapitalCare, and she's going to talk about what they are doing with leisure at CapitalCare.
Hi, everybody. I just have some slides to share with you. Thank you, Dr. Power, for introducing me and connecting with culture change as well as infection control. We, CapitalCare, a couple years ago, decided to look at our programming, and it directly relates to some of the things that we've been talking about so far. And I just want to show you some background information on what we've been, a resource that we have come up with. We started Neighborhood Time a couple years ago when we first started looking at some recreation stats for programming. When we started this, we collected our stats and we looked and we found that 20% of our residents were attending 80% of our programs. And this really confused us because a while ago, many of our residents were attending a lot of our group programs that we offered. So this was a change for us we weren't reaching everybody. We were only reaching 20% of our residents with the group programs that we were offering. Yet our group programs that we were offering were based on interests of our residents. The other part was that a lot of our programs were happening, traditional programming was happening at 10:30, 2:30, 6:30 times. And what we found in between that is people were waiting for the next thing to happen, but nothing was happening when there wasn't recreation programs happening. We needed to change this. We needed to take a look and we needed to adapt to the changes and see how we can reach more people. With traditional programming, if people are sitting and waiting to be entertained, the only thing we were doing was creating a culture of learned helplessness and not reaching the other people, the other 80% of residents. So how do we provide meaningful engagement to a lot of our residents, and how do we change this 80-20 ratio that we have created? We wanted to change, and we needed to change people waiting in long-term care to people living in long-term care. When we first started talking about this change, I was very hesitant because I thought that the calendar that we provided did cover a lot of the resident interests, but I did deep down feel that we needed to change to do something different to reach more people. So how does recreation services fit into a changing culture, and how do we stay person-centered? This is Clara in the picture, and she was a lady that was quite social when you went and visited with her one-on-one, but she stayed in her room, and very seldom did she come out for group programs. And she just said she didn't like groups, and she was one of the people that was social, and I really thought, how do we get her more involved? And since we started doing neighborhood time, Clara does now come out. But how did we need to make this change? I think when we first started talking about neighborhood time, what CapitalCare did was really look in our own personal lives. So if you picture your own neighborhood, where each of us lives in our own neighborhood, there's many people in a neighborhood. We may know our neighbors really, really well. We may be complete strangers to our neighbors, and we are all from very different backgrounds. But yet in your neighborhood, when you come into your own neighborhood, there's a feeling of safety or belonging in that neighborhood. And looking at residents in long-term care, we wanted to provide that same feeling. We wanted to provide a neighborhood. In CapitalCare, we don't call our residents living on units, we call them neighborhoods. So if we meant that true to nature, how do we produce this neighborhood feeling that happens naturally in our own environments that we live in? The next step we needed to do was look at why somebody like Clara is quite social and enjoys people, but wasn't coming to groups. What was that? What weren't we providing for her? So when we thought of this, we wanted to separate recreation and leisure time. Recreation is our traditional recreation programming, the 10, 30, 2:30, 6:30 times that we have on our calendars, very similar to our own lives. My own life, I have everything scheduled on a family calendar or in my iPhone, and those are events that happen, whether it's weekly sports that we attend, all of our family attends to, or get-togethers with friends. During COVID, Zoom meetings with a group of people that I miss and want to get to. Those things are scheduled into my calendar. I look forward to them. They're things I enjoy, but they're scheduled, which is great because we all need that in our lives. We need something to look forward to. What other piece was missing from this? I do a lot of other recreation and leisure in my life that is not scheduled on my phone. So the other piece, looking at your own personal lives, is if you have nothing scheduled, not a recreation group program to go to and scheduled in your calendar or your iPhone, what are you doing with your time? In my personal life, on a Saturday when we have nothing planned, my family may be gathered in my house, but we may all be doing something different. I may be in my pajamas reading a great book. My husband may be looking through the news online. My son might be gaming with one of his friends, and my other son may also be reading or talking to his girlfriend. We typically tend to all be on the same level in our living room, but we're all doing something different. We are engaging in our own leisure, and we're choosing what we're doing in that time. Leisure is something that allows us to kind of choose what we're doing in the moment, but also go along with our feelings. And we needed to bring this back into long-term care and be able to follow the residents' rhythms of what they wanted to do in the moment, but also provide programs that they look forward to. This is where neighborhood time was developed. And the neighborhood time is the leisure time that we do in the moment. When we provide choice for residents, it provides a little bit more, it provides not a little bit more, but definitely more meaning to them because they're choosing in the moment. Not that our recreation programs is not something that they can look forward to, but providing choice for residents is a huge thing. The process of going through and getting to neighborhood time has been a journey. It did not happen overnight. Like I said, CapitalCare has been talking about this for a couple of years, but really during COVID, it really became apparent on how this is a necessity for people living in care. I'll talk a little bit more about that after some questions that we have, but I did just want to touch point on neighborhood time and how important choice is. First and foremost, the most important thing is knowing your residents. We do a getting to know me profile based on Dr. Kitwood's work. And with those know me profiles, we are able to identify interests, but we actually connect with the residents and make sure that they have choice within those interests, and maybe possibly an opportunity to try something new as well. And when, I can't stress enough, when a resident has the opportunity to choose within their own interests, it becomes meaningful for them, and then balances the recreation and leisure time that we have for them. This is Yvonne and Eunice in this picture. These, Yvonne is the lady reaching for the Connect 4. She is a resident that we worked with that was one of that 20% of residents that went to absolutely everything. She enjoyed all of the programs. We loved having her at programs because she was interactive and engaged, but yet we were spending quite a bit of time with her, even though she was able to do a lot of things on her own. Through neighborhood time, she was able to identify to us things in the moment that she felt like doing. She did want to still come to group activities, but she did have a lot of interests on her own. And through neighborhood time, we discovered that she was able to lead some programs. So not only are people able to choose different activities that they do, people are also able to lead programs. She was very capable of being provided with some resources of her choice in the moment and be able to assist other residents in doing an activity. I have a little visual for you. This picture with the circle is not one of ours from our long-term care setting, but it does show an example of what a group program would look like. A traditional recreation group program, we're either in a circle, around an activity, around a table, around one activity. So even if it's active games or a sport, we're around one particular activity. And within that activity, there's a leader. We have even done the inner circle, outer circle idea. So in the inner circle, you have people that are most active and engaged in the program. And then the outer circle, you have people that are more passive in the program. With this, what tends to happen is if you don't have that leader, or if that leader needs to move around the group, then there's periods of time people are not engaged. And you have this feeling of you're not being able to reach and engage and be with people all at one time. With neighborhood time, it looks a little bit different than the traditional programming. Instead of one group centered around a central activity with one leader, there's many programs that are happening at the same time. So it looks a little different. I'll share a video with you. I have a video, I won't have sound on the video, but it just shows you what neighborhood time can look like compared to the group activity. This is from CapitalCare Strathcona in Sherwood Park, Alberta, where I work with 75 residents. 75 residents that live in this neighborhood are of mixed abilities. We have people that are self-directed and come knocking on my door and tell me what they would like to do. And we have residents living with dementia, and we have residents that are non-communicative and in Jerry chairs. And we are able to find something for everybody to do, very similar to our own neighborhoods or our own households when we do our leisure, where we're all together, but we might be doing different things. It could be individual or it could be in small groups. So I'll just run the video. So first here we have a puzzle. One lady is helping two other people. Coming up, we have two gentlemen who are unable to communicate. But I think Al also mentioned, or Dr. Power also mentioned, that there was people that are low functioning and unable to communicate tend to be in one spot. And with people during that time, during neighborhood time, we move people into different spots and change through the environment. Oh, sorry. So here we'll start again. But with the people that are unable to communicate choice to us, they are able to move and change the environment, the sensory aspects in their environment to give them change in the environment for choice. Here we have a group of ladies that are enjoying coffee together. They love to get together, and often they would ask for each other later on. We have a lady here who's coloring who never attended groups. So she was always passive and never engaged in the activities. She prefers to do things on her own. We have a resident coming up who's one of our younger residents and loves TV, but we have him kind of in the middle of everybody so everybody can watch or listen to the music at the same time. And this is Clara, who didn't come out of her room before, but is now engaging with the pet. This is Christine, our recreation therapy assistant. And over comes Vivian, our lady who's 102 years old, to tell Christine that the puzzle she had was not the right puzzle and we needed to change it because the other residents had a hard time participating. So she was looking after the other residents. A little bit different. This was at the beginning of neighborhood time starting. So it's a 75 resident neighborhood that we do a lot of engagement with and is quite full in this common area. During COVID, things looked a little bit different. I will take some time to talk more about some benefits and specifically what neighborhood time looks like during COVID times. But I just want to pause here for a moment and maybe take a moment to answer any questions that people might have, and we can go from there.
I was muted. I'm here now. Heather, thank you. Loved everything you were talking about. And I want to encourage people to put some questions in the comment box or comments in the comment box. We'd love to hear from you. We know there are a lot of people out there watching this show today. And while we're waiting for some questions to come in, oh, and we've got questions already. So Kim asks, do you have a profile sheet that gets filled out with the resident? And I don't know.
Yeah, we do a recreation assessment or a profile sheet that we do. We go and we meet the resident. We do a leisure history, a life history. We take some time to get to know the resident, where they are in the moment at the time that they're meeting us. And we put together a Know Me profile that is shared not only with the recreation team, but with all the disciplines, as well as in normal times, volunteers and other people that are coming into the center. We share the non-confidential information about the individual as a person, so that we really get an opportunity to know them and have some ideas of resources that we might need for neighborhood time. In saying that, I don't have all the answers. I don't like going to a resident and say, okay, I know you like this, so this is what you're going to do during neighborhood time. That defeats the purpose. The resources and the Know Me just gives you some items that you could have available for residents to choose from.
Thank you. And Kim put in a follow-up question asking if you could share that sheet, if you'd be willing to share that.
I could, yeah, sure. I will do that.
All right, thank you. So Kathleen asks, how could you engage with families to join residents in this neighborhood time?
Absolutely, and that's the beauty of neighborhood time is it's something that anybody can be involved in. Again, not the recreation team. I believe it takes a little bit of the recreation team at the beginning to build up some resources and get the information gathered, but then anybody can join in, volunteers or families or other disciplines within the site. People can come and start engaging with residents, and really it's just getting the word out there. We call it neighborhood time over corporately of CapitalCare, but it's actually named something different in each site, very similar to our own neighborhoods. I live in Summerwood. I'm sure not all of you live in a neighborhood called Summerwood. So depending on who your residents are, it's named differently. And just informing staff or families or volunteers what that's like and what it looks like, it gets them involved. And families, so important, because we may not be able to get all the information from the residents. So they might be able to help us with that. But we then also might be able to help them because families sometimes struggle with how to visit. And sometimes it's very quiet or it's a very short visit. So being able to provide a how-to visit with neighborhood time type activities is really helpful to families as well.
And I want to, so Anne asked if the video examples were before COVID. She just wanted, can you clarify?
Yeah, the one video that I did show you was actually quite early on when we started neighborhood time. When during COVID restrictions, when we could only do group sizes of 5 or less, it looked very similar to this. Maybe a little bit more spacing instead of just that one circle that we did. We have lots of alcoves or lots of little great niches where I worked so people can be, and we would just float from little group to little group. So instead of only having one group of 5 people going, we had several groups or individual activities. Once everybody is set up and going, we were then able to expand our reach and go into people's rooms or individuals and get people started. And one thing that was fantastic that I noticed personally was when these little groups are kind of set up, staff were then engaging. Staff from other disciplines would stop and sit down with 1 or 2 people. When it was a big recreation group, they felt like they were intruding and didn't want to interrupt. But when these little pockets of either individual or small groups were happening, staff were then also feeling more comfortable to engage.
That's really important too, right? It's what naturally draws people in. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Denise asks if neighborhood time, does that imply specific times of the day?
That's a great question, because that's something we talked about at the very beginning as well. How do we fit in neighborhood time into our busy calendars that we had going? So there was definitely a process. Again, this was a huge journey and we learned lots throughout the journey. Some people put it in their calendars so that other staff or families or residents knew when it was happening. And other people left it off their calendars completely. What we found out personally, what I found, I first started putting it on the calendar at the center I worked at. It worked fantastic from the 3 to 5 time during sundowning, or maybe responsive behaviors tended to be happening. And through neighborhood time, we could be a little bit more spontaneous and react to people's needs instead of providing something and hoping that helped the needs for them. But what we found is now we have some group programs, and in between there we do neighborhood time. So even if we have a program scheduled, we might do neighborhood time before it starts and set everybody up and then go and do the group program. So it started with a very specific time of the day, and now it kind of fluidly happens throughout the day.
Like it does at home, right?
Yeah, like it does at home, exactly.
You know, I was thinking this just struck me is, it happens so often when we try to change and get away from the institutional framework. And so rather than units, we call places neighborhoods, but we never or rarely stop to say, well, what happens in a neighborhood? Like and this is really taking it deep, right? And it's not just changing words matter, but it's not just changing words. It's really digging so much deeper, and love what you are doing. And there are a bunch more questions. Do you want to do the rest of you were going to talk a bit about some barriers and then get back to the questions, or you want to take some more right now?
Let's take 1 or 2 more. I think we're okay.
All right. So Laura asks, how do you go about sharing the Know Me forms with team members outside of recreation?
Again, I think every place works very different. So you have to find what works for you. Even within CapitalCare, we have 6 main sites, 10 extended sites, and each of us may do it a little bit differently. Personally, for myself, I have a volunteer binder. So before COVID, when volunteers were coming in, I have a volunteer binder that I changed the profile a little bit so that there's no confidential information in there. and rehab staff or extended staff or front office staff and volunteers can check that that binder, as well as right in the team rooms for nursing, right in the CHA binders where they have to do all of their documentation. This Know Me profile is the front sheet. In some of our sites, we have the profile displayed right in the residents' rooms or near the residents' doors. Where I work, not a lot of people are in their rooms. A lot of people are outside. So not everybody gets a chance to see those Know Me posters in the rooms. Whereas some sites, that's where a lot of people are. They're going to the rooms to engage with the residents. So that's the best spot for it to work in those areas. So really you have to find, where is staff, volunteers, where are they often, so that they can access this information. And really it's what works best at your site.
Great, love it. And so let's do one more question, and then I know you've got some other information to share. So Paul asks, for the non-communicative folks, stimulation is change. How do you decide where to relocate and when?
This is a great question, because this was a challenge I might talk a little bit more about later, but a huge challenge for the people that I worked with. How the selling point for neighborhood time is the residents get to choose. It's their agenda, not our agenda. How do we do this with late stage dementia residents or people that are unable to communicate their choice to us? It was a huge barrier. And I firmly believe, one of my pet peeves is knowing exactly where John is, because John is in the exact same spot every single day. And the staff mean well, because John was a farmer and he loves to look outside. So every single day, John is facing the window, looking outside, and has no idea what's going on behind him. As much as it might be good in that moment, if somebody is in the exact same spot 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it would drive me mad. You need change in your environment. So knowing the person and who they are and what they like and don't like, and you might have to trial some things and see and watch for reaction of where they enjoy and where they don't enjoy, and spend a little bit of time with these people as you put them in different spots. Turning John around so the window's behind him and he sees everybody is change. And think sensory with this group of population. Think sensory in terms of, it's not only what they visually see, but what they hear, what they smell, what they taste, putting on a warm blanket for them, thinking about the sensory environment and offering change within that environment. Sometimes you're gonna see, oh, that music I just put on, I don't think he really likes it, because I've never seen that face before. So you're identifying through that things that they may choose and they may not. You have to just really watch for those really fine cues.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. Do you want to talk a little bit about the successes that you've had and some of the barriers? And then I think we'll have a little bit of time for some more questions. I'm glad we have so many people engaged and watching today. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. I'll go back to my slides so you don't have to just look at this the time. And I'll share some benefits that we've had. All right, so some benefits. I could talk forever about this, so I do have a list of things that I will refer to, and I'll try not to spend too much time on it. But some benefits that we discovered. The biggest thing for me is, as much as I didn't want to get rid of our calendars at the beginning, I felt this really has given us back some time. Because there's not a calendar to keep us going from program to program to program, we do have a little bit more time in our day. We can be a little bit more spontaneous in our day. And because we're spontaneous, we're able to react to the flow, the natural flow of what's going on in the neighborhood. So we're able to respond to people's needs. The lady in the picture is Gwen. And she's one of those residents that, yes, she came to every group program, but she has dementia and she wouldn't be engaging in the program. She just wanted to be around people. So it was difficult to get the task accomplished when Gwen was with us. because it was very disruptive and distracting for us. How can we be with Gwen and still be able to offer somebody crafts or trivia or things like that? And through neighborhood time, we were able to set people up who are very capable of doing some of their own leisure with activities like that. And we were able to spend time with Gwen and be in the moment. Some days she needed us, some days she didn't. Some days she would come with us to each group program and participate with us. And sometimes she just didn't want to have anything to do with us, but we were able to respond to what she needed in the moment. So this neighborhood time gave us some flexibility, gave us our time back. Just as I had mentioned with Clara earlier on, some people are intimidated by large groups, not only residents, but staff as well. So neighborhood time gave people the opportunity to be around involvement, or sorry, around activity, but not feel like they're not participating, because there's lots of things going on. Just coming out of the room and being around the activity, or working on a project on your own, or spending time with the animals at the site, that they feel like there's that sense of belonging. Small groups and one-to-one interactions that are chosen in the moment become more meaningful. Activities chosen by the residents are meaningful to them. Not that our group programs aren't programs that are interested to the residents, but in the moment, we are showing them that we are asking their opinion, and their opinion matters. And their interest in what they want to do in the moment matters to them. We did over time discover that this decreases isolation, it decreases depression. The responsive behaviors tended to go away because we were able to respond to them, not go away, I shouldn't say, there's still responsive behaviors, but we were able to be available for people more in the moment. It also empowers people to take back their own leisure. So before, when we were developing this learned helplessness, where they were just waiting for what we were providing for them, they're now able to take that ownership back. One thing I always caution people, it's hard when you start asking people choice to begin with. We got a lot of, I don't know, or empty answers, because people didn't know what to choose or what they felt like doing in the moment, because it was foreign to them at that time. And I explain this again, looking back at my own life, thinking about my own children. If I went to them and said, we have a free Saturday, what do you guys want to do today? Our family is horrible at making decisions, and we would talk and say, I don't know, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? Anything you want to do, I'll do it. And that was very similar to a reaction that we got from residents. If we went to them and just opened up the question and said, what do you feel like doing? They didn't know. They couldn't give us an answer. The other side of that is if you give them too many choices, if you bring them a cart of 30 different activities and ask them what they would want to do, you'll get the same answer, because it's too overwhelming to choose from. So knowing your residents and offering 1, 2, or 3 choices, they're able to narrow it down. And this really helped us being able to identify, and people were feeling empowered because they were then making decisions and choosing what they wanted to do. Even people living with dementia were able then to make a choice instead of having an open-ended question. We also found residents were making friends easier and being able to ask for each other and look out for each other, because they were in these smaller groups. They felt a little bit more of a connection with each other and being able to connect over a similar activity that they were both choosing to do at the moment. When we weren't offering neighborhood time or recreation wasn't working, sometimes these activities would happen because residents were asking for them or asking for their friends to be together. Residents became leaders. So similar to Eunice, who I showed you, who actually ended up leading some small groups, or 1 or 2 other people in some tabletop games. I personally think it increases the quality of life of our residents. I've always been a person that believes recreation touches everybody, regardless of whether somebody is a social person or not. We all have interests and leisure. It doesn't mean that we all have to be together. in order to do that. So I think people feel more fulfilled throughout it, and residents are engaged more. It also, as I mentioned before, other staff were joining in. So it breaks down these silos of disciplines that we have, and creating more of a neighborhood where people are involved and getting to know each other on a more personal basis. Benefits during COVID. We did have benefits. I was on project for a year, specifically working on neighborhood time. And so many people that I knew once COVID started said, oh my goodness, this is not good for your project and things are going to be delayed. And I was worried at first. And actually what we found is we were so happy that we started doing neighborhood time before COVID restrictions came into place, because the recreation teams that were familiar and understood neighborhood time and were already doing it continued to do it during COVID. So neighborhood time and one-to-ones became our main source of leisure. And it was the main delivery that we were able to reach and engage residents with. Staff that were familiar were easier transition. So they were able to know how to ask choice. They were knowing what people were interested and capable of doing on their own or in small groups. When the group size was reduced to under 15 or one-to-one, residents already knew what they were capable of and what they were interested in, and that we were able to provide some programming for them. Our calendars, we couldn't have a calendar or group programmings, but neighborhood time was still able to happen. So even though we didn't have this calendar to follow, we were still able to provide activities. Activities and leisure and engagement did not shut down because we had neighborhood time. We were able to continue doing things. We were continue to reaching more people than just 5. So if the group size for restrictions was 5 or less, we weren't just engaging 5 people at one time, we were engaging many people. We were able to do activities in their rooms. So we have Barbara with the card. We had already had some resources set up and we knew who was capable of doing some programs on their own. So some activities happened in their own room. We were also able to be spontaneous. So Joan, also on the telephone, being able to go to her room and ask her what she needs help with, and maybe she needed help with setting up the phone or something particular in her room, and we were able to connect and get her set up and started, and then we were able to go and help somebody else. So there wasn't this learned helplessness of people sitting back and waiting for something to happen. Dr. Power also talked about infection control, and this was a big thing as COVID started and continues today. A lot of times with neighborhood time, people will have their own projects. So instead of a group project where 15 people are around and you're sharing resources, we already had some resources set aside for specific residents. So it was their project or their things, their resources. So there wasn't the infection control concern in between those things, because we weren't sharing resources. People had their own projects and their own resources to do. Again, depending on the residents that you work with or that live where you work, they could become leaders. Volunteers and our clergy, who did a lot of our spiritual groups, were not able to come into our site because of COVID restrictions. At the site that I work with, there was one gentleman who, again, liked to attend all of the programs. So when our calendars were no longer being posted and COVID restrictions came out, he was, what is happening? Why aren't we doing bingo? Why isn't there a service, religious service going on? And him and I sat down and discovered that he was willing to do a group program. So this gentleman actually read the spiritual group. At that time, we had to keep numbers 15 and under, but he spent the week preparing. He would come and see me, let me know what he's providing for the service, ask my opinion, and he would work on that throughout the week. And then once a week, he would do a service for about 10 residents. And it filled his time, not only when he was leading the program, but also throughout. So yeah, just being able to be leaders was a big, important part as well. Dr. Power also mentioned that there was a notice of less distress in people living with dementia during COVID. And we found this to be true too. Many staff had approached me and just said things seem calmer and not so rushed. And I think because people are being engaged in a different way, we're able also to be responsive to people's needs. There was an opportunity for people not to feel either rushed to get to the next activity or waiting for something to happen, or this feeling of going from one thing to the next to the next. It was a little bit more fluid and relaxed. One thing I would like to share with you, I have a quote. We asked for some feedback and some field notes from our recreation staff during COVID and even before COVID when we started Neighborhood Time on how Neighborhood Time is working where they are. And I have a quote here from Shauna Kessler, one of our recreation therapists at the Kipnis Center for Veterans in Edmonton, and her quote for Neighborhood Time. And it says, recreation staff have been able to engage more residents during Neighborhood Time than through traditional programming. Various staff have observed through implementing Neighborhood Time that we are reaching more residents with the various activities that can be offered through Neighborhood Time concept. After implementing Neighborhood Time during the pandemic, recreation staff have noticed an increase in the number of residents that are being engaged in various activities during Neighborhood Time, compared to the usual programs that seem to be reaching a lot of the same residents. I found this so interesting. This is happening during COVID restrictions. So in all of the benefits, I have other lists that I could probably share with you. I think that there's lots of benefits to Neighborhood Time. It is change, so it is not without its challenges. So I do want to share some challenges. These are just a few, again, of the challenges that we have had. One of them was changing from leading to facilitating. So us as rec therapists or therapy assistants, we feel the need to do for and protect and care for residents. And we had a struggle of going from leading a program and being that leader in the group to allowing somebody else to lead their own leisure and own their own leisure. But how do we facilitate that? How do we provide support for that? So we have worked through that. The other thing is never enough tools or supplies. So this was a challenge during COVID because we were accessing volunteers or families for donations, and we were unable to accept donations during COVID. Never enough tools. We can always have more tools and supplies so that we can provide people with their own resources and go from there. Spending time with one person. So even though we have all this time back and we can now be spontaneous and respond to responsive behaviors or just somebody who needs us in the moment, we have to make sure that we are not just spending time with one person for that length of time of when we're doing this. We do need to think of creative ways on how we can respond to the needs of one particular resident at the same time as supporting other people. So being able to set somebody up and tell them that you'll come back, and also make sure that you do come back so that you provide that or build that trust with that person. Maybe that person who needs you is coming with you as you support others. And they also will get a sense of spending time with you, but also maybe a sense of belonging as well. There was this picture of, because there wasn't a big group activity happening, there was this picture of like recreation staff must not be doing anything right now because there's not a big group gathered. So sometimes staff would be pulled from other disciplines to come and do something or help someone because there isn't a group programming that they're leading. We just had to do lots of education for this to let people know there is something happening and we are needed at that moment. Not sure what to do. So this was a big challenge, either because we didn't have something on the calendar specific to do, so that we want to do, making sure it's the resident's choice and the resident's agenda, not our own agenda. And then at the same time, also making sure that we are looking at the residents' needs. So not sure what to do with different populations. I often get the question, well, I'm not sure that this would work with residents living with dementia or a secure dementia unit. I say this is the perfect type of concept for a dementia unit, because people living with dementia have a hard time engaging for long periods of time on one activity, which is our group activity. So providing multiple activities at the same time, I think, fits naturally with people living with dementia. Or again, what we talked about during the questions, people that are low functioning and unable to communicate, making sure that we're providing choices through the environment. So we did provide some feedback in some of these challenges. And then I did also talk a little bit before about people conditioned to be entertained. So our residents that were used to the big group programs and attended all the group programs were wondering, what do I do in this time? I want to do a recreation program, and how come bingo's not happening, or how come we're not doing a craft, those kinds of things. And just reassuring them that they can still do those kinds of things, but with a different look to it. Regardless of these challenges, it's just been so rewarding and so worth it to conquer some of these challenges and to help all of the recreation staff. We put together a curriculum of ideas on how to start neighborhood time, how to promote it, tools that we can use, problem solving for the challenges that I talked about and many more, how it's helped during COVID, and then activity suggestions for different populations. So specific for residents with dementia or young adults or veterans or people that are unable to communicate choice, specific activities for neighborhood time to get you started. It's not the solution to all the problems and questions, but it's a curriculum that helps you get started in your program. You can either copy the link that's on the page, or you can also just contact myself directly, and I would be able to get a link to you for that. The curriculum is for sale, $30, or you can just contact me with any questions you may have. With the curriculum, I do have a 7 tips series of challenges that may come up, and tips on how to use the curriculum, or tips on how to kind of conquer some of those challenges. So I have, if anybody has any questions, we have more time for questions.
We could go a little bit over. We're almost at an hour. Heather, oh my gosh, thank you so much. This is amazing. You know, there's a question that was in here, and I'm really curious about this, if it falls into one of those things you were just talking about. But someone from St. Peter's residence asked the question, you stated you set up activities and leave for one-to-one visits. Do you notice that people stay engaged, or do they leave? I find at my home, we need to facilitate 100% of the time. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that, I could talk forever, so sorry about
No, it's wonderful.
What I find is there is one of the challenges we had is, what's the difference between one-on-ones and neighborhood time? And a big part of this is making sure that one-to-ones is my agenda. I'm going to the resident because I need to see them about something. They're not coming to programs, or I want to get them a resource, or I need to go talk to them because I have thought that they seem depressed, or, you know, it's my agenda. Through neighborhood time, it is the residents' agenda. So we're not leaving a group of residents for an hour to go and spend one-to-one with somebody else. During neighborhood time, you can have one-to-one experiences with residents, but still be able to support multiple people at the same time. It is, change needs to grow over time. And it's a journey, so it does not happen overnight. It has to be growing. Start with a couple of groups, and then you can grow from there. And then your residents will change, and you'll have to go back to just a couple of groups and grow from there again. But the key is, one, when you have small groups set up with activities, set them up and tell them you'll be back. Provide that trust that you do come back, and provide that support, and then spend a time with somebody who needs you, and then you go back and spend. So again, one-on-ones might be for an hour or might be for 20 minutes, whereas one-to-ones, when you're doing it with neighborhood time, they're shorter, or the person is actually coming with you and being with you in the moment as you're helping others. And you can approach it many different ways. Either Gwen, we saw earlier, Gwen would come with us, and she's just with me holding my hands as we're going to different types of activities, or somebody that you can ask, come and help me. I'm going to go from person to person and I need your assistance with that. So come as we do that. So being able to support people and get used to working the room, it is a little bit different than one-to-ones, but over a period of a couple of weeks, and you get used to it and the residents get used to it, you're able then to start to expand your reach. The curriculum does talk about like a 4-week period of how you can slowly start to grow this idea and where to start and kind of where to make adjustments.
Thank you. And thank you to CapitalCare for making this resource available. It's looks wonderful, and I know a lot of people want to take advantage of that. Thank you for making it so affordable. That's great. So we are at the top of the hour, and I wanted to see if Sherry or Al, any closing comments, anything you wanted to share with the people watching, or Heather, if there's anything else you want to add.
I just want to thank Heather for that amazing presentation. It was really so detailed and explained all the nuances. And I think, once again, necessity is the mother of invention. It wasn't until we were forced to rethink that these new paradigms sometimes appear. And I think it also points up that a large part of culture change is changing operations, institutional structures, and systems, because I think a lot of the reason activities have gone the way they have is because they've been driven by institutional schedules, silos, and mindsets. And when something like COVID comes and just explodes that, then you have the opportunity to just go back to square one and say, okay, what can we do? And you come up with something that not only is much better, but that you can carry on into the post-COVID era as well. So I think it's wonderful.
That's great. Thanks, Al.
Thanks. And Al, I totally agree with you. I think it's been an opportunity, one of those silver linings of the tragedy of COVID, but definitely a silver lining that we've been able to amplify the work that was happening before. What excites me about this is that it really did start with one of the previous Walk With Me conferences, and the sessions that we had at those conferences really instilled in us a need to make some change. And so I really encourage people to stay involved with the Walk With Me, with the things that are happening in the States. There's so many great things that for culture change that are happening out there. Stay involved in this stuff. The conference that's in a year and a half, it seems like a long way away, but it will be here in no time flat. So keep engaged, and let's keep working together to help each other find new and better ways.
Absolutely. Oh gosh, thank you all so much. Thanks for making this possible. Thank you for sharing your story. Hope we'll see everybody in Calgary in 2022. I know we'll all want to be together, right? So this has been fabulous. And again, thank you for sharing this with the world. Thank you to everyone who joined us for the live show today, and for your comments and questions. What a great way to spend an hour today. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everybody.